music serves as a universal language that connects people on a profound, intangible level. But how do musicians do this? I'm Warren Buchholz, jazz brand manager at WUSF, and I'm on a mission to find out.
The mountainside and morning light casts a miracle dew, sparkling sun.
Meet Laila Biali. She's a multi-award-winning Canadian singer-songwriter, pianist, and CBC Music National radio host of the program Saturday Night Jazz. She is a JUNO award winner and has recently released a new album, Wintersongs. She will be performing at the Carrollwood Cultural Center in Tampa on January 16th at 7:30 p.m. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Laila Biali.
Hi.
Hi, Laila.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. We just got back from Vancouver last night.
Oh.
And our flight was several hours delayed, so I was in bed at 3 a.m.
Oh man. All right.
Yeah, so a little, and you're my second interview today, but I'm so happy to be speaking with you, Warren. Is the sound quality okay in the air?
Yeah, this is fine. Okay. This is fine. Yeah.
Beautiful.
But
yay.
Thank you so much for taking some time. And of course, flights are never on time. We always hope, and it's never that. So, but thank you. So, first thing I always like to ask is, who inspired you to want to get into the life of creating music?
Ooh, that's a good question. It was probably my first piano teacher. So I grew up in a family of four girls. I have three sisters, and they're all musical, but none of them pursued music. And I'm the youngest. My mom tells the story that when I was 3.5, I climbed up onto the piano bench and started plunking out the melody to Sesame Street. And so she put me in piano lessons, and my first teacher, her name was Juanita Ryan, and going to her home to study music just felt really magical from day one. And classical really was my first love. Mm-hmm. And I actually wanted to become a concert pianist for much of my teenage life, but I was in a car accident that kind of forced me to change course. And so that's sort of the beginning of the early sources of inspiration. And then, of course, I later discovered Joni Mitchell and Michael Jackson and Bjork and Radiohead and, Diana Krall, just a huge range of artists that to this day I love.
And it's fascinating to see how children's television at that time helped develop such love for music through Sesame Street, through Mr. Rogers, so on and so forth. It's amazing to see how much we were inspired by this music.
100%. And, a shout out to the funding of NPR and PBS and these incredible networks that have allowed everybody to access that fantastic content, right? So nice tie-in.
Yeah. But so you've won a JUNO in 2019, I believe, and you've been nominated throughout. How did it feel to win an award like that?
It was super special. It was unexpected. I'll never forget that moment. It was March of 2019, and my husband and son were actually in Maui. We had planned a vacation as a family. My parents lived there part-time. And so we were there, and then the nomination came in, and it happened to be during my son's spring break. So I had to totally rejig my plans, and I had to leave Maui early. And I don't know if you remember when... I'm forgetting the precise name of the aircraft, Max something. It was a Boeing aircraft that they had issues with. So my flight got canceled. I almost didn't make the JUNOs. Yeah. And so I get there. They were held in London, Ontario that year. And I'm just completely exhausted. I did an overnight flight And I was also hosting a few events because I'm a host with CBC,
Yeah.
Canada's NPR. So anyway, by the time we got to the actual awards, I was sitting next to a fellow nominee, and she said, "Have you prepared a speech?" And I looked at her and I said, "No." And she said, "You might want to." And they were coming up to my category, which at the time was vocal jazz. And then they announced me as the winner. I had thumbed out a few thank yous on my phone, but of course forgot my phone at the table and then just went up to the podium and wung it. So, and meanwhile, my son and husband were on a whaling outing in Maui, a whale watching outing. So it was just really, really interesting, a slice of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, another missed flight. Oh man, it's never ending with airports, is it? But you brought up
Right.
the CBC, and I would love to know more about what you do there. I read that you host a Saturday night jazz program.
Yeah, so Saturday Night Jazz is actually Canada's only remaining national terrestrial radio program.
Oh wow.
And we still have millions of listeners across the country, which is awesome. My show runs on two channels of the CBC across the country for the first hour on Saturday nights on CBC Music and what we call CBC Radio or Radio Canada. And then the remaining 3 hours of the show are exclusively on CBC Music and people can stream online, etc. So I am now 8.5 years into that role. I can hardly
Wow.
believe it.
All right.
I know, right? How time flies. Started in 2017. And it's a really special position that I hold, and one that is really wonderful because I get to not only uplift and share music by Canadian artists, but also by artists from the States and the rest of the world. So, we feature a lot of artists who are based in Florida. And so that's a wonderful way to just enjoy a bit of a cultural exchange, if we can even call it that, because our countries in many ways are still very similar.
Yeah, I would love to kind of know what differences have you found between Canada and the United States when it comes to jazz?
It's a great question. So I feel that the original roots of jazz, which really are based in New Orleans, are, I think, more robust in the US jazz scene. Whereas in Canada, and maybe it's our cultural lineage, we seem to have borrowed more from what could be described as the ECM approach to jazz, which is like, a very huge and famous German label that's been around for decades. And their approach it's just a different sound. In some ways, for me, it conjures up more imagery as one listens. I would almost describe it as like not bucolic or pastoral, but there's something about it that really is suggestive of sweeping landscapes. And there's a bit of a gentleness to it. And so I feel like Canadians have embraced that style. And really, that boils down in large part to the influence of a Canadian musician who spent a lot of time in the UK named Kenny Wheeler. And he's a trumpet player and composer. He's no longer with us, but his approach to jazz really blends sort of classical and contemporary music with the original foundations of jazz. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Oscar Peterson.
Yes, yes.
And because he just celebrated his centenary year. He's no longer with us, but he would have turned 100 this past August. Or you know what? Now I'm mixed up because it was a full year of celebrating his 100th year. So I don't recall if it was that he would have turned 100 in 2024 or 2025. But his daughter, Celine Peterson, and his wife, who's still alive, Kelly, they put together a bunch of concerts all around the world celebrating, 100 years of Oscar Peterson. I had the privilege to be part of one of those concerts here in Toronto at Massey Hall, which is kind of a legendary venue. Yeah, and Oscar, of course, was firmly rooted in like swing and the bebop tradition. Um, that has to be acknowledged. So I really think at the end of the day, there's just a huge range of jazz expressions in both countries, both sides of the border.
Speaking of, I was going through my CD collection, and here's Oscar Peterson. Uh, it's a legendary Peterson trio at the Blue Note, so I thought that was
Ooh,
cool. So I've been listening to that. So
yeah.
speaking of, but it does sound like you've embraced more of that kind of picturesque kind of music, which kind of leads us to your latest album, Wintersongs. This is your 10th album as a band leader, and I read it was 3 years in the making. Can you kind of tell me more about how this album came to be?
Absolutely. It was written at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, which is this incredible place, community, I would describe it as, that's existed now, I think, for 70 years in Canada. And since its inception, the Banff Center has been hosting artist residencies across fields and disciplines. And they have welcomed people again from around the world. But of course, they're always looking to support Canadian artists in particular. And so I've been out to the Banff Center a number of times over the past 10 years. My first time attending was in 2003. So a long, long time ago. But then I didn't return to the center until 2015. And I've been back there almost annually since. And so for Wintersongs, I was granted my first official residency. It was 2 weeks long, the longest stretch I'd ever been there. And I had one plan. I went into that residency with one plan, which was to adapt this beautiful young Indigenous poet, to adapt her words, her lyrics to music. And then once I arrived at the Banff Center in November of 2021, I was in a studio that I had never seen, right in the woods, floor to ceiling, glass windows, and this beautiful piano looking out on the mountains and into a forest and creatures of all kinds coming up to the window. And it was snowing. It was so beautiful. And out came the first song on Winter Songs, Drifting Down Ice. And I just began to essentially create a soundtrack right there on the spot for what I was looking out on, these winter scenes. And the reason it took 3 years to move Wintersongs from those initial ideas to, the actual release has to do with what happens with holiday or seasonal releases, where timeline wise, you typically have to be finished by like ideally early summer in order to set up the album properly for the following, let's say, fall. And so we had intended to release Wintersongs actually in the fall of 2022. So just a year later. But what happened was summer came and went, and our vision for the music kept expanding. So, we weren't working on it day in and day out for 3 years straight, but we would revisit it. And then, 1 year after another, the summer would come around, and my husband and co-producer Ben Whitman and I would look at each other and say, "Oh, I think there's more." And so the record kept expanding. Initially it was just string quartet. And then in 2023, we decided to bring in a chamber orchestra, and I'm so glad we did. So in some ways, I think winter asks us to be patient. I know it's very different in Florida than it is up here in Canada, but maybe even in Florida, I don't know. Do you have a sense of the seasons? I guess it's different down there, right?
Yeah, it's very different. So we're in Tampa, and so we get 2 seasons basically, hot and hotter, and then maybe a week of cold. But I would say our winter is our summer, where it's bearing down completely suffocatingly hot. And so it's hard to go
Oh,
outside. It's hard to do things. And so I compare that to winter in a way where we're kind of stuck inside. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. And I've been to Florida many times, and I actually have a great affection for um, your area, Tampa, but also, going down to Sarasota, Fort
Oh, yeah.
Myers.
Yeah.
And this time I get to go to Miami as well, which is really fun. But yeah, so for us in Canada, everything just kind of slows down as things get cold, and we all go a little bit into hibernation. And so, in some ways, the winters teach us patience,
Mm.
and also they renew our sense of anticipation.
Yeah.
And in some ways, you might even say hope for the new year and spring as we await that season. And so my husband and I, this was the first time we were really patient with a project. I'm usually somebody who tends to want to get things out before they're even ready. Even my own son, I hope this doesn't sound too crass, but was premature. It's like, just let's get things moving here, folks.
Yep.
So Winter Songs taught us to be patient. And I think in the end, there was reward in that.
So you had the chamber, you've had the string with it. What does collaboration look like among this big group of people?
That's a great question. Nobody has asked that. I think it's a combination of, for me, because I know the people that I'm going to work with to a large degree as I work on the music and write the music and in some cases arrange the music. And so to some degree, I'm writing to their skills and to their voice or with their voice in mind. But then what's wonderful is I, it would be a disservice not to then allow them to carry the music forward as they envision it and hear it, thus bringing something super fresh and often unexpected to the project. And that's what happened across the board. Jane Bennett approached, the songs that she guested on in a way that was really exciting and steered the music in the studio in real time in new directions, which is so very much of jazz. That's where the spirit of jazz comes in. Even though this album ultimately lands in a crossover chamber jazz territory, maybe let's say traditional pop, if we're going to borrow the Grammys language, the category that it got nominated in. But yeah, that spirit of jazz and collaboration in the moment, but also, for example, with Rob Mathis, who did the orchestrations, that wasn't an in the moment process. It was to some degree in the studio because we didn't get to hear his arrangements until we were sitting in the studio with 20 musicians
Oh, wow.
on the clock recording. And so there was some real faith there. And we were surprised by his approach on some of the songs. Delighted. But then in the aftermath, my co-producer and husband, Ben, and I, we then had to revisit the songs and consider how Rob's beautiful orchestrations were impacting the music overall and how we might then further adapt the project, which we did. And so collaboration is this beautiful disruptor. And you know what I mean? It opens up so many possibilities and it
Yeah.
inevitably expands projects.
What for you was the most fulfilling part of this album, creating it?
Ooh, wow. I think it has been seeing how it's reaching people. I think as an artist, that every time you release new work, you have to believe in it. But for me, the whole purpose is not just to create and express what's within me, but it's to reach other people. That's to me that's the lifeblood of the music. How is it connecting with listeners, And so to see how people have responded to this project, regardless of location. So one of the very first people to spin Rocky Mountain Lullaby, which was our first single that we released ahead of the full album release, was based in Florida.
Oh, nice.
And I remember thinking, oh, like, that's so cool. Like, of course, Floridians and people who live in warmer climates might still somehow relate to what the pictures this music is painting. It's about imagination. It doesn't just have to be experience, right? Lived experience. It's imagination. So that to me was really exciting. And it has been so rewarding to see the music travel around the world, both in live performance and as I ship out CDs. I'm about to go back to the post office, old school, to send out some more physical records. And that's been the most rewarding part of the process. Yeah.
The Tiny Desk contest is coming back. Unsigned musicians enter the contest by sending at NPR Music a video of you playing one original song between January 13th and February 9th. If you win, you'll play your very own Tiny Desk concert. Learn more at npr.org/Tiny Desk Contest. And make sure you tune into Tiny Desk Radio Friday nights at 9 and Saturday nights at 8 on WUSF 89.7, your spot for local. Turn now to your show. Friday, January 16th at Carrollwood Cultural Center in Tampa. You're playing Joni Mitchell and 70s songwriters, which include Leonard Cohen, Neil Young. What was your inspiration for picking these artists?
Well, I started covering songs from Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, Bruce Cockburn, Neil Young, years ago. And some of it was born out of my desire to create a Canadian songbook, because all of those artists are also Canadian. But it was also a really hefty reminder of this particular decade in which music was it's a very special decade in music. In fact, my husband and I were traveling home last night from the west coast of Canada to Toronto. And he was watching a documentary on this band, or I guess side musicians who were in the studio during the 70s recording with Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor, the Eagles, and Carole King, like all these incredible songwriters. And it was just a reminder again of that particular era of music and how powerful it was. But I'm going to say that we are going to play around with the definition of 70s music at Carrollwood. So there will be bona fide songs, many of them from the 70s, by artists that you just mentioned. Neil Young is one. We'll play one of his huge hits. Several songs from Joni Mitchell. But then we're gonna play a bit with the definition of 70s music, and I'll have to unpack that live and in concert. But I've been doing some thinking about it and just wanted to have some fun.
What can audiences expect from this show?
I think that they're going to hear music that to a large degree is familiar, however, presented in a way that is entirely new. And that for me is the piece that's exciting, because they've got something they can latch onto and hang their hats on. If they're not necessarily jazz fans, this is the show for them. Come out and experience music that, in my view, celebrates these incredible voices and storytellers, because really it's about the brilliant narratives that artists like Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen have written that still have, in my opinion, universal resonance and relevance today. Yeah. But there'll be lots of stories in between the songs to provide some context. I have an amazing Florida rhythm section joining me, Paul Gavin, who is a resident of Tampa,
Nice.
will be on drums, and Brandon Robertson, who's originally from Tampa. So two really strong Tampa connections. And yeah, just a really warm, dynamic, and friendly show that is incredibly audience inclusive. Which doesn't mean like, audience participation per se, but they're not going to feel like they're outside of the performance. I think the music is going to wrap around them and they'll feel like they're in our living room. That's the goal.
Each person will have to get on stage and sing a tune, is what you're saying.
Right? That'll be in the second set after they've had a bit to drink. Exactly.
There we go.
Loosened up.
So these Tampa players you're performing with, have you had a chance to rehearse with them, or is that going to be like day off for you?
It'll be a combination of songs they've performed with me in the past.
Okay.
I've been to Florida a number of times, Fort Myers in particular, and Sarasota. So both Paul and Brandon have performed with me several times, but there's lots of new music that will be new to them. So we'll be rehearsing and debuting a bunch of those songs the night before in Fort Myers. So we'll have had a little bit of a rehearsal prior to Carrollwood.
This does seem like if you're not into jazz or don't know where to start with jazz, this seems like a good doorway into jazz, because you're taking hits from people that you probably already know and combining it with the genre. So that sounds like a wonderful show for sure.
Thanks.
Do you have a favorite song from the concert?
Oh, well, I'll tell you that now I'm going to give it away, but the guys, Paul in particular, loves how we do Neil Young's Heart of Gold. But, I always wonder, what would Neil Young himself think of this arrangement? And what would Neil Young fans think of this arrangement? Hopefully they'll appreciate our take. But for me, I think it's one of the Joni Mitchell arrangements. I'm not sure which, because how they read from concert to concert is so different because I work with jazz musicians. So there's always a bit of variety. But I just feel so deeply connected to who she is, even though she's several decades older than I am. And her music, is in its own space. She was such a fan of jazz. She just released this compilation she called Joni's Jazz, which features, I think it's 5 CDs.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge box set of Joni over the decades, and there's all these incredible stories about her formative years and being told, like even in the 60s, hey, you should go check out these jazz musicians. She was living in LA at the time. I think that they're going to relate to what you're doing musically more than like some of the other typical rock or folk studio musicians. And that was how she ended up having this really unique sound. And I think it's a sound that I really relate to. But then her story, again, it's the storytelling to me. It's these incredible narratives that endure rather than just the style of her music. Yeah.
And these different artists that were on the end of the 60s into the 70s, there was a huge push for kind of, I want to say, like protest songs or songs that really defined the era that we were going through. And I think it really does resonate with what's going on today.
That's really well put. And I'm glad you raised that, because there's 2 songs in the set. One is from Leonard Cohen. The other is from Bruce Cockburn. And interestingly, they weren't written during the 70s.
Oh, interesting.
But these are 2 artists that had, well, Leonard Cohen especially, but a very significant impact during that particular time in history. And to me, that's in the DNA of who they remained, as they went on to create new work, through the 80s and even 90s. And the 2 songs I landed on Well, Bruce Coburn's is definitely a protest song. It's called Stolen Land. And I had to think hard about whether or not we should perform it, just because I don't ever want to be offensive. But it's not offensive. I think it asks important questions that we're all wrestling with. We may land on different sides of the politics of it all, but it's so important to have the conversation. And I think that's what these artists ultimately were calling us, and are still through their music calling us to do. Joni Mitchell did it with, I would say, a little less of a heavy hand than, say, Bruce Coburn. And funnily enough, when she was on the Dick Cavett show and he asked her about her politics, she kind of, in this unusually sing-songy way, "Oh, I don't really think much about politics," she said. And I was like, "Oh, Joni, yes, you do. You know, it's all over your music." But I think she wanted to be light and winsome in that particular interview. She didn't want to be divisive. And so that's the beautiful thing about music, is it reaches across the things that might otherwise divide us. And I think sometimes we can ask tougher questions through music, or, open up a dialogue, or find shared space where it may otherwise be difficult to find that kind of space, through songs like the ones that Bruce Coburn and Leonard Cohen wrote. So you're very perceptive to have picked up on that.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful show. I'm hoping to make it. It's just going to be wonderful. Friday, January 16th, 7:30 p.m. at Carrollwood Cultural Center in Tampa. But thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me today about the show.
It's a thrill. I'm so excited to come back. And I was working on a couple brand new arrangements. I don't think they'll be ready in time for this show. One was by Gordon Lightfoot and the other by Anne Murray, and it was called Snowbird. And I thought, oh, that'd be so perfect to play in Florida. Yep. But I'm just really thrilled to get to
make it happen.
It's coming. And really, it's such a privilege to be able to bring this project to Carrollwood and Tampa. And I'm very much looking forward to shedding this thick turtleneck that you see and enjoying some beautiful sun and nature while I'm down there, something that I always do when I'm in Florida.
You're coming at the right time. It's warming up already, and we had 1 week of kind of cold temperatures, and now it's warm. So it'll be a great time to get outside and go to parks, beaches, whatever you want to do. It's going to be a good time.
That's the plan.
Well, thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Keep on moving, keep on moving. Oh, 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 oh.
Today's audio was recorded over Zoom. I'm Warren Buchholz, host and editor. Studio Sessions is a product of WUSF and is sponsored by Community Foundation Tampa Bay, the Gobioff Foundation, with support from the Palladium and from you. Thank you for your support. Learn more about jazz and Arts Access Florida by visiting our website at wusfjazz.org. Copyright 2026, WUSF.